What's going on? Boys, thanks to our patrons and Fiverr customers, subscribe to our Patreon free for behind the scenes stuff. Arm yourselves, life stuff. This'll either be relatively short or we'll have multiple topics. Normally, I try to avoid talking myself up. I prefer focusing on shortcomings because it gives you something to work on. It makes your vulnerabilities less vulnerable, and people tend to respond better to that. Or at least, loosely, the sorts of people I'm looking for. But this doesn't mean I have a low opinion of myself. It's the opposite. Lots of people go around talking about intelligence. Everybody is obsessed with IQ. And usually these sorts of people are fucking dumb. Or if they are, quotes, high IQ, they're lacking or incompetent enough in other areas. They hide their impotence, if from nobody but themselves, behind a number. What's that number doing for you? If you didn't talk about your number, would anyone know? Would there be any indication you're anything but a little loser dude? Now, I think I'm clever very specifically. And outside those specific areas, I am wildly incompetent and slow to learn. I wasn't gifted growing up, and there are a number of topics within that we can talk about. Maybe we'll get to all of them, maybe just to one. But I don't talk about it very often, because something I'll give myself is I'm not a complete moron, and something you realize quickly whenever you have any degree of aptitude for anything is if you start going around with a big head or trying to build your identity on this single aptitude, you are inviting crushing events to happen. Sober, externally inflicted ego deaths. Sorts of perception is one of the things I'll give myself credit for. And one of the things you perceive very quickly is, let's say you are 50% better at something than the average person is. Or let's say you have 50 more IQ points than the average person. You're 150 IQ. And you have a pretty serious edge against Joe Dipshit. Well, first, you'll have a harder time fitting in, but not in a sexy loner way. More of a horseshoe thing by which you loop back around to being too retarded to fit in. You miss things a person shouldn't miss. What's obvious to others is not obvious to you. And there's no way to comfort yourself from the fact you are unable to fit in, unless you figure out how to use what you have to start getting results. And materialism, or all these little accommodation accoutrement shit, you figure out how to collect those, and that's how you fit in. But usually these are things people see. If you catch yourself needing to tell people about things to comfort yourself, you're on a sinking ship, you're in a sinking dinghy, there's nobody else on that ship with you. Or in other words, it doesn't matter if you're the tallest dude alive if you live in a world in which basketball doesn't exist. You need to invent the thing you're good at, or figure out how to make people care about it, usually via materialism or other socially shit. You are essentially disabled. You're too fat to fit through a normal person door, and you're expecting to be lauded for it. But we got off track. One of the things you perceive almost immediately when you are staking your identity on this disability of yours is you realize it is truly a disability, not a humble brag, little flex disability, although there is an element of that in there. You can't help it. You have to cope somehow. And you realize this because if you were truly gifted, if you were truly super good at something you wouldn't seem like a retard to people, which is the way you seem to people. You'd seem like an actual genius, or you'd seem like an actual maestro, or whatever it is. Because you're Mr. 150 IQ, your number is big enough, you look like an idiot, and truly you are because you don't have shit, you don't have people. You have enough maybe to win sometimes, because that's another thing. It's nothing is ever one stat versus one stat. It's also almost never one on one. So you're one person putting one stat against an unknown number of people and an unknown combination of stats. Even if you have a big number, more often than not, you're going to lose. And in terms of the stats game, wisdom is a much more powerful stat. But it doesn't matter because you ever play Caves of Quud? You can be a psychic in that game, and the psychic abilities are very overpowered, so they balance it with a stat called Psychic Glimmer. And once you pass a certain threshold, and ideally once you've passed the threshold, you should be psychically able to rip apart the world you're in, the balancing forces come in, which are psychers from other universes who have invaded your universe to steal your psychic power from you and kill you. And despite any issues with that game, I love that form of balancing because you can, on one hand, play through the game normally under normal balancing and have one whole experience. But then if you go the psychic route, there are two separate end games balanced completely differently. The first form is actual balance. The second form is if you're stacking your glimmer, you need to break the game as hard as you can, fourth wall breaking shit. Because if you don't, there are equally fourth wall breaking, if not more so, people coming to kill you. It's great. Anyway, you'll meet people who have 500 IQ. And I mention the glimmer because these people feel like sharks. You think you're a predator, and maybe in some ways you are, but these people are predators who prey on predators. So they wait for you to start using this distinguishing feature or talent, and you're flopping in the water, you're sending out these ripples into the universe, and then they show up and humiliate you, which would be bad enough, but it's worse because to alert them, to draw their attention, usually you'll by this point be using this distinguishing feature as a load-bearing pillar in your identity. And it's like they get pleasure from destroying these pillars, from destroying a lesser being's identity. And on one hand, who can blame them, because you're going around being insufferable, and you have no idea how deep the waters you're swimming on are. But another thing, I think I mentioned it a minute ago, but these people don't seem retarded the way you seem. Because there's a chasm of separation from Joe Dipshit. You, with your 150 IQ, you jumped down into the chasm. And now you'll live out the rest of your life probably with broken legs down below everybody else, where these apex predators jumped all the way across the chasm, and it's another loop back around thing. They are so separated from Joe Dipshit, they become heroes, regardless of who or what they are as people. And you'll know this because they are covered in indications of whatever gift they possess. They don't need to say anything. It is obvious. Imagine it like a series of lights in the dark. You, with your 150 IQ, which you think is this bright, shining bulb, it's actually a little ember. Joe Dipshit doesn't even realize you're producing light at all, because why would he? It's not obvious. And these apex predators are spotlights. You can't help but see the light. And you might be thinking, that's okay. They can have their spotlight, and I can have my ember, and I can go around with it proudly. Bad idea. 2 reasons. One, and I don't know why this is, well, it's probably a power thing. If you are someone with any sort of potential Joe Dipshit might not have, but you don't have so much potential, it's like you were born to do this. Again, you don't have to talk about it. You, by existing, you actualize this hyper potential in an insurmountable way. You have the potential, but you have to work on it. Joe Dipshit hates that you have it, and will gather up a bunch of Joe Dipshits to fuck up your potential, to smash out your ember, solely because they don't have it. And they don't have it. I hate people more than you know. Whereas with these 500 IQ spotlight people, Joe Dipshit knows he can't beat this spotlight person at whatever they do. And also, the value is so obvious, you can't, well, you can, but usually people won't immediately throw it away. So they want this shit on their side, so they'll get accepted. And while we're here momentarily, the sports manga thing, the discipline and determination versus talent thing, that is maybe the realm you're playing in. But they never talk about these other people who don't, it's not even talent, it's not even work or discipline, they are otherworldly beings. You never see people talk about them for some reason. They exist, and you'll meet them, if you're stupid. But see, the other part of this, or the problem is, the spotlight people, they emphasize their power without needing to say anything, while also ingratiating themselves with Joe Dipshit by feeding on people like you if you're dumb enough to walk around being insufferable. These heroes kill the things that live down in the chasm, or maybe upset people or freak them out or get them angry, by trying to crawl up out of the chasm and impose their own not so evident self-importance. You meet these people occasionally, and I despise them more than anybody, because they're part of the reason you, like a rat, need to crawl around, keep your head down, keep your voice hushed, if not your mouth shut. Because if you stand up at all, it's never just you versus the Joe Dipshit Brigade, which on its own would be hard enough. You're not going to have any help dealing with that crew. But then also, and not always actually, but you're always at risk of it, dealing with a spotlight person on top of them whom you couldn't beat one-on-one. So there's no way safely or sustainably to assert yourself in any sort of prideful way directly. You have to play dirty to beat these people, which is difficult because another thing you'll notice is these spotlight people, these absolutely once in a lifetime brilliant people, their brilliance encompasses dirt too. These people are never saints. That's another thing. In my experience, anyone who is the best at something to the point it's not even close, these are usually weird sociopathy people. Oh, and that's another thing about these spotlight people. I keep hitting the arm. They almost never have dirt attached to their identity, or they'll never acknowledge it. And that irritates me because I don't care how perfect a person appears to be. There is always some awful thing on them or inside them. But they think their brilliance allows them to escape that. And I hate that. I hate the idea that anyone can go through life without ever needing to look in the mirror and be rightly horrified. But anyway, that's why, this is all why, despite my having a high opinion of myself, I'll focus on the negatives. I will talk about the positives usually only very reluctantly. And I'm also not a big fan of anybody who speaks highly of themselves at me. Even if you are what you say you obviously aren't that enough for it to go without saying, which is the point you realize you're moving in the right direction and also aren't being really obnoxious to me. And also, you're inviting, cosmically inviting, these spotlight people to show up when I still haven't figured out how to deal with them yet. Outside theoretical, long porkination. Now, there were some other things I wanted to talk about. Maybe we will rush through them. Lately, I've been obsessing over my taste for bad girls. I've known forever that was in me. I've always enjoyed it, but a couple months ago I had a second awakening, and now I'm analyzing it a bit more. No conclusions or nothing special to say here yet, but two anecdotes. There was a troubled girl in middle school who was into me for no reason. And I've talked about this in the notes, but she was at least 6 feet tall and she was built like she played college ball. But she'd done some other kind of fucked up thing and she was getting taken to the office, escorted to the office. And we were waiting outside for something. There were a number of us. And she started telling people one by one that she hated them, or that they sucked, or this or that. But she said I was cool, and she said it in a shy way, and that made, I guess, a lifelong impression on me. But I didn't do anything about it because back then I didn't know what to do. I feel like I didn't become sentient until I was 20. And even then, only barely. But then the delinquent anecdote that connects up with the gifted thing. I think this is when I was in intermediate school. Probably intermediate school. It was the first year I think I was in that program. Actually, it might have been middle school, but I don't think it was. Anyway, there was this girl in there who was not only at the peak of whatever year that school was supposed to contain, but also she had been held back once or twice for whatever reason. Probably antisocial shit. But she looked really ratty all the time, and she had a ratty voice. The voice someone like that should have. She was attractive to young me because of how rough and scary she was, and the fact she bullied one of my friends in there relentlessly for having man tits all year, that added to it. I think if we're trying to act like all of this is connected, the fact she was held back but was in a gifted program has something to do with something. But really, I'm here trying to figure out why I simp for delinquent women. There is a paper trail here. This didn't come out of nowhere. Going to elementary school in the ghetto probably didn't hurt. I think I've told this story before, but this is a long time ago. Short version. This black girl named Raquel kissed me in kindergarten, and I distinctly remember she had scary eyes. So maybe this all started very early. I've been submissive and breedable from day one. Now we jump back into the gifted program shit for a moment. Part of me wonders, I've been watching videos talking about the way gifted programs, at least during the 80s and early 90s, were a psychic thing, or they were ostensibly for intelligence shit, but really it was for mysticism or psycher testing. Oh, before we get into that, another example of Mr. 150 IQ. There was one dude in there who was really 150 IQ-ish, obnoxious. Later, much later, still in school, this was in high school I think, he got his hand cut off or some shit. It happened in a shop class, but part of me wonders if that happened because someone pushed him or there was something, because I don't know anyone who liked him. A lot of people hated him because he made himself hateable by getting in people's faces and doing weird, annoying shit. Gross shit, too. He did the lower eyelids thing and the whites of the eyes thing, you know what I'm talking about? Anyway, what happened to his hand could have been an accident, but if it weren't an accident, I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, back to the mysticism. Part of me wonders if there is any truth to the psychic shit with the gifted programs. One, if it ever happened, and I'm sure it did to an extent. I'm wondering how long it went on, because mystically, I feel close to the level I feel about the stuff I'm good at, maybe a little bit lower, but the key is close enough to know the waters are much, much deeper than you think they are. If there are any waters in this case. And I wish I could go through former gifted students and check their spiritual ideas or mystical ideas or divinational aptitude. Mysticism feels like it's becoming a little more important again. It went dead for a while, but it feels like it's beginning to come back. And for anyone who's motherfucker, you cunt. For anyone who's curious, maybe, has been watching or has seen the videos I'm talking about, firsthand what happened in a gifted class, if not all gifted classes, the way it worked was once a week we would get called out of our normal classes and go to this gifted class. We'd spend the full day there. Ages were all mixed together, all one curriculum, but it was an invented curriculum, and I'm assuming that's why lots of teachers wanted to do gifted shit, because they got to do their own stuff and talk about what they were interested in, which makes a lot of sense because it felt like every year, aside from maybe the first two, we had a different teacher, and every single one wanted to talk about ancient Egypt. Every single one. And I to this day, the only thing I remember from all those fucking Egyptian courses or studies, whatever, there was it looked like a catapult, but it was a mechanism that I think they used to dredge sand out of the Nile. That's the only thing out of all those years. I remember so much more about ancient Greece, which we did for 1 year, than I did about any of the ancient Egypt, which we did every year after, with different teachers. Everyone has a different approach to the same nothing. 1 year, we did this extended thing about the Oregon Trail, and I think this must have happened all within the first 2 years. That first teacher was really kick-ass. The rest, not so good. She was the one who did the ancient Egypt thing, but with her, we did this Oregon Trail Wild West Pioneer role-playing game, and it was a race, and I feel like I've talked about this on the channel before, but it's relevant again, and it's fun and funny. We got my wagon train, led by me, we got last place because because I refused to interact peacefully with the Indians. I was certain, or the Native Americans, excuse me, got Indians on the brain and hostility. We just killed them all. There was this entire system by which you were supposed to deduce which tribes were hostile and diplomacy and all this shit. I said, fuck that. And we killed them all. We turned the Oregon Trail into a graveyard, the likes of which the nation had never seen. We also did some, quotes, robotics stuff in the vein later on robotics clubs would do. And I think there were robotics clubs. My school was not that great. See, the entire thing was not, or the entire program, it was more like focused free-form learning. So we learned about something specific, and we had checkpoints we had to reach, but it wasn't like Common Core. We had a lot of liberty to learn in different ways. And it was a lot of fun. I liked it a lot. And now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, using my perception powers, I'm wondering if this was not actually about intelligence or psychicness per se, and, son of a bitch, more like guinea pig runs for alternatives to Common Core. Because when you think gifted class, you think of, you probably have a sort of person in mind, and that was not the case. There was one of each sort of person, it felt like. There were jocks in there, there was that delinquent girl in there, nerds in there, everybody. Oh, and there was a popular girl in there who, in hindsight, I think had a soft spot for me, but was not so direct about it, but she was always... She had my back in popular situations when she was around. And the last I heard, which was a long time ago now, almost 10 years ago now, actually, I think she got married, had a kid, and is now a housewife. Which would sound really sweet, but she had nurse energy, so one of the few people I hope is doing well. But you meet people sometimes in life. It makes complete sense where they end up or why they end up there, but for the complete opposite reasons. I think back, and I hope most of them are doing well. I sold this baseball dude my copy of Skyrim because he came from a religious background, wasn't allowed to play video games for a long time. Finally was allowed to. I sold him my copy of Skyrim for cheap, and we got along because he got really into it. Anyway, cutting it here, the major takeaway from this video: keep your mouth shut, try to blend in. You think it's dark out, you have no idea how dark it is. Do your best to fit in, keep your mouth shut, and if you want to have an ego, which I think you should, if you want to do it safely, go about it in a way that does not involve building yourself up via your mouth alone. The pursuers are going to come after your ass. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.